Beautiful. So this is the Sunday Sounds of Dhamma program. And my name is Dhammadipa. I go by she or ella in my heritage language of Spanish. And this morning's program will be, as usual, about 10 minutes or so of guided meditation. And then about half an hour or so of Dhamma talk. And then I'll open it up for your reflections, comments, questions, and we close with sharing of blessings. So you can, I think for today, the type of meditation I would like to suggest is a meditation on the breath. And we're particularly going to, I hope, that to offer a meditation that particularly helps with the continuity of awareness. So you can begin by just settling into your meditation posture. Maybe moving the body from side to side or from front to back. And allowing the body to settle into a balanced and upright position. Relaxing the body, relaxing the belly. And allowing the body to settle right here. And from that steady base, moving the attention upward. Perhaps allowing the spine to come into alignment so the muscles can release and relax. Softening the eyes and softening the mouth. By now, perhaps the sensations of the breath breathing the body have come into your awareness. And you could rest the mind wherever you feel those sensations. And perhaps also being present for the pauses between the breaths, no matter how short or long they are. Just staying curious about those moments of stillness. Allowing the attention to ride along the length of the breath, all the way from one pause to the next. So that brings us to the end of the meditation. So I'll begin with the homage to the Buddha as usual, and folks are welcome to chant along if you know it or to let it wash over you. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. This weekend is the full moon of July. And that means that's a very special day in the Buddhist calendar for particularly for early Buddhist sanghas, Theravada sanghas or other sanghas in different parts of the world. And it's a day called Asalha Puja, Salha Puja, and it means, that's a Pali phrase, it means the honoring of the beginning of the Sangha. So it's a day when the Buddha, after his awakening, it's said about more or less 7 weeks after his awakening, had an encounter with the 5 other spiritual seekers that had been his practice companions for some time. As the story goes, they had been practicing these very, very austere, severe practices, particularly starving, particularly fasting to the point of extreme. And the Buddha at one point decided that that really wasn't helpful, that wasn't going to lead to the end of suffering. And so they rejected him, they abandoned him because they thought that he was going in the wrong direction. But then after his awakening, he decides that those are the first people that he's going to go and talk to about the actual path to the end of suffering. And because they were sincere seekers, sincere practitioners. So these are known as the 5 ascetics. So he walks to where they are, and they have some questions about whether or not they're going to accept him. But ultimately they do let him come and sit down. And they, after some exchange, also decide to listen to him. They weren't so sure they wanted to listen to him. But the Buddha proceeds to tell them about what's known as the middle way, the way of not trying to oppress the body or harm the body or in any way, and the way of also not indulging in sensual pleasures or thinking that that is somehow going to resolve your problem. And this middle way of compassion toward oneself. He had to find his compassion toward himself in order to wake up. And then he gives some further teachings. He gives, so this sutta is known as the first turning of the wheel of Dharma. first turning of the wheel. And he gives some teachings about the truth of dukkha, dukkha meaning suffering or unsatisfactoriness, the cause of dukkha, the end of dukkha, right? So the cause of suffering, the end of suffering, and the path leading to the end of suffering. And having done all this, he says, he gives various teachings. He says, we need to understand the suffering and the unsatisfactoriness in our lives, which is oftentimes the opposite of what we want to do, right? What we want to do is turn away from it or push it away, but we really need to understand it. And then we need to abandon the causes. We need to relinquish whatever we might be doing that is causing that or contributing to the presence of suffering or unsatisfactoriness in our lives. And that will bring the end of suffering, both in small, individual, everyday moments, as well as ultimately. But the beautiful part that I really want to emphasize today, and that I want to really talk about in terms of my own practice and the possibilities of practice, is this part very near the end of the sutta. So it says that all kinds of heavenly beings rejoice that the Buddha has given this teaching, and then Venerable this ascetic named Kondanya was one of the 5. And after the Buddha gives his teaching, Kondanya says, everything that is of the nature to arise is of the nature to cease. Everything that is of the nature to arise is of the nature to cease. Everything, including suffering. Right? Everything. And so Kondanya becomes Anya Kondanya. This word Anya means knowing. He becomes Kondanya who knows. And it's said that this is the first transmission of the Dharma from one person, from the Buddha, to another person. So in that moment, the Buddha's teaching becomes the legacy of all of humanity. It's not just his personal legacy. It is the legacy of all of humanity. And this may seem like a very simple insight, though. We might say, well, gosh, really? That was such a big deal? In fact, Bhante Sujato, in his translation of this sutta, which is on Sutta Central, a source that I often use for translations, I like Bhante Sujato's translations because he tends to be a little bit more colloquial, a little bit more contemporary in his language. So he says, everything that has a beginning has an end. That's, as he puts it quite simply. But there is this matter of understanding. There is this matter of knowing this truth in a way that is pervasive, that is penetrating, that actually shifts your entire relationship to your life. And that sounds like a big promise, and it is, actually. So I want to tell you a little example about that. It's an example from a while back. I was co-leading a year-long program for lay folks who lived outside of the temple, but were involved with San Francisco Zen Center. So I was one of the residents there, one of the teachers there. And we had a cohort of, I think, about 60 people or so. And we had 5 teachers. So each teacher had a little subgroup of 12 folks. And we were kind of divided up geographically because San Francisco Bay Area is a pretty big area. So I was living over in Berkeley at that time. And so I had a group of folks, about 12 folks in my subgroup, in my cohort. And so the very first assignment, the first month, was to notice which foot you put in your pants or your skirt or your kilt or your dress or your shorts in the morning. Which foot went in first? That's all. Just one mindfulness of body practice. So that was the assignment for the first month. Great. So the second month comes, and this young woman, and so now I can tell this story because she actually told this story publicly herself after the fact, my friend, this student in the program. And it's a wonderful win. She is by far the hero of the story. So she comes to me, though, the second month, and she says, it's been more than 4 weeks. I still haven't seen what foot I put in my skirt in the morning. And it's not like I'm not trying. I'm trying. But every day I get in my car to go to work and I think, oh no, here I am in my car and I still didn't see what foot I put in the skirt this morning. Okay, so we talked a little bit about it. We talked about habits, how habit can lead us to be a little bit less mindful of what's going on. So maybe do something out of order, change your morning routine a little bit. We talked about, being present for the moment before the moment you're trying to see. Right? You need to, this is why we did a meditation on the continuity of awareness just a moment ago. Because when you have that continuity of awareness, you're more likely to be present for whatever phenomena is here. Right? But you need to be there for the one before most of the time, if you're looking for a specific point in time. So we talked a little bit about that. We talked a little bit about, rushing, maybe trying to slow down a little bit, all of that. Okay, great. So off she goes. She's going to give it a try again. And she comes back to me a couple of weeks later when we're getting together for the group. She comes back and she says, guess what? Guess what? I saw that I put my left foot in my skirt in the mornings. Most of the time, it's the left foot. In fact, now I'm able to see every morning, I can see which foot I put in my skirt or my pants or my shorts. Great. Excellent. And then she says to me, but that's not the coolest part. Oh, okay. So what's the coolest part? So she says, the coolest part is that I also noticed that my daughter, so now she was the mom of a 3-year-old daughter who she's also getting dressed in the morning. She says, the coolest part is that I noticed that my daughter also puts her left foot in first. So beautiful, right? So beautiful. Because now, by having mindfulness of her own body, she has suddenly come into a different relationship with her daughter. She's more attentive to what's happening. And even if her daughter decides to change to the right foot, it's okay because she's more attentive there. She's more engaged in that moment. And maybe there's a tiny bit of less friction. As a mom who has dressed my daughter, I could say, maybe there's a tiny bit of less friction there in the morning. Because if you have the pants and you know she prefers the left foot, then you hand her the left side first. Right? So her whole relationship to that moment in the morning changed by being attentive, by being mindful, by being aware of her own body. And it made possible the choices that could lead to less suffering in a very simple, straightforward way. No drama involved. But it was in part because of this continuity of awareness that she was able to develop. She was able to be ready, to be present the moment before putting the foot in the skirt, so that she could see what was happening. And again, this might sound very simple, but much of what we're doing, if we observe very carefully, is that we are sorting out our experience and only looking at certain parts of it, right? So I've spoken here before in recent weeks and months about the way that our attention sort of skips along the stream of consciousness and is only aware of certain points within that stream. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's actually fine. The mind is moving extremely quickly. The mind is experiencing many contacts, even in a very brief period of time. So the only way to experience individual mind moments, I would propose, is in meditation. That doesn't happen when you're putting your pants and your skirt on. You're not seeing exactly every single mind moment that is occurring. You're only seeing some of them. And that's fine. If we want to see individual mind moments, that can happen, but the mind has to be extremely clear and extremely focused and quite settled to look at itself in that way and see with that degree of specificity. But that kind of capacity isn't necessary for us to start to see the effects of mindfulness in our lives. We can see the effects of mindfulness in our lives with a very, very small amount of attention and intention. Right? Both things are necessary. We have to be willing, that's the intention part. We have to be willing to see what's present, interested in it. But then we also have to train the mind. And this is one of the things that I find quite helpful about many of the early Buddhist forms of meditation. They're showing us, they're inviting us to look at one category of experience or one type of mental phenomena, and then you shift to another one, and then you shift to another one. And part of that practice is learning the process, is learning the interrelationships there between those phenomena. But part of that process is also a training of the mind, that you can learn how to place your attention on different types of phenomena and learn how to keep your attention, persist with those things by practicing that again and again. And as we have all experienced, sooner or later, the mind goes off to do something else, right? The mind gets involved in some other object. That's all right. That's perfectly fine. It's not something we're trying to fix. I would suggest that what you might be trying to invite is this sense of being able to place the attention again and again with a gentleness and a neutralness, a non-judgmental sense about it, and a clarity and a receptiveness. Yes, okay, I'm willing to be with what's here, even if it might need to change. That ability to receive what's here is the only way that we can actually begin to engage with our lives. Up until that point, we're just engaging with our ideas about our lives. And for some folks, I have to say, it's easier to start with external phenomena, the so-called external phenomena, than the internal phenomena. That's also okay. That's really fine. For some folks, it might it wasn't her case, but it might have been easier for someone to start by noticing which foot their kid put in first, and then shift to noticing their own. That's okay. There's just different tendencies of what kind of perception we hold to be more important. And ultimately, I would say, one of the key learnings of that continuity of awareness is you can also begin to see what types of experience you tend to put to the forefront. Right? So a simple example of this is some folks are visual learners, and that's what they focus on. They focus on the visual. And so if we talk about a visual metaphor, then they get it immediately. Right? And other folks are auditory learners. They need to hear it and have it explained. And that process of hearing it will help them to work it out. And some folks are actual, like physical, hands-on learners. Goodness knows I'm not that kind. To me, the material world is much more complex, actually, than the mental world. But for some folks, they learn very clearly with their hands and with the sense of touch and by getting to know the physicality of the world. So you learn which are the sense bases, the sense fields that you have a stronger affinity with. And maybe you rely on them a little bit more, but then also maybe you stretch yourself at some point and you begin to try to teach the mind to be willing to attend to other kinds of phenomena. Right? So that eventually you can have this continuity and you can have actually more choice or more intentionality or even just more understanding of which things are being held as important, which things are being allowed to inform your experience. And the same way with thought. I had a funny experience of many, many years back. I was trying to study in meditation when I was in the past and when I was in the future and when I was in the present. It's just even trying to get a hang of where was the mind in the sense of time. And I went to my teacher, Shosan, and I said, oh my gosh, I must really want to die early because I'm just repeating the past over and over and over again. And it wasn't really that I wanted to die or that I wanted to ignore the future, but it was that the past had become a habit for me, that the past had become something that I allowed to be much more important than the present. Instead of understanding that most of the information from the past is already here. It's already built into this body and this mind. Those things that have happened, they've happened, they're here. In their resultants, most of them. And we still have, according to karmic teaching, we might still have some resultants that have yet to play out, but most of it's already baked in here. So there's no need to keep rehashing all of that. And then again, this continuity of awareness sees this beautiful moment by moment arising and presence and ceasing, arising and presence and ceasing of all things. Yeah, there's this beautiful poem by Ryokan that comes to mind suddenly. Let's see if I can remember the beginning of it. I'm forgetting the first part of the line, but it's something like by being true to your experience, by practicing with the truth of your experience. So now I'm paraphrasing. You will be able to let go even of flowers. Yeah. So we celebrate this day on which the Buddha shared the wisdom that he had discovered, and Kondanya really saw for the first time. Exactly that. The beautiful blossoming of arising and cessation of his life. So may you all also experience this. May you find your feet in your shorts. You could take that on as a homework assignment. But really, may you all awaken to the truths, the many beautiful truths of our lives.